Okay, welcome back to this fall edition, the very first this fall, of Applied AI Lunch Talks. I see a question in the room, no? Okay, so welcome to all of you who've made the effort to come up here to Skylab. The bonus is going to be that you can network and ask extra questions to our speakers afterwards. And those of you joining us online, welcome to you too. We have a new record of registrants. We are about 80 people, I think, registered. We'll see how many actually joins. And to the people who didn't join, you can watch it on demand afterwards. So even if you didn't make it up here to Skylab, you still have the option to ask questions in the chat. We're going to take those questions afterwards. So please write in the chat when things come up for you, things you're curious to have more elaboration on, or things that just puzzles you. So my name is Camilla Nørgaard Jensen. I'm an innovation manager here at DTU Skylab. I also work with the Pioneer Center for AI. And together with AI Denmark, those three entities, I have collaborated about bringing all of these speakers to you to learn more about applied AI. So without much further ado, I'd say one of the reasons why I chose the speakers for today is that over the summer, when I've talked to people about AI, and especially how people apply AI, they're like hesitant to move forward because they don't know what the regulations are going to be. So I have a speaker to you that is an expert in the Applied AI Act, Leonard van Rompuy. I'm not sure if I'm butchering his name, but he will pronounce it correctly in a minute. And then afterwards, we have a visit from Novozymes. Peter Mørk Groth is going to talk about, together with Sarah Mesquita, who graciously jumped in as a substitute for Victoria Payne, who fell ill, unfortunately. So Sarah jumped in with not much preparation at all. We're really grateful for that. And they're going to talk about how to make sense of the data haystack. So you have something to look forward to. And I'd like to welcome our first speaker on the stage. Please welcome Leonard.
Yes, now I got it.
You might want this one.
Yeah.
So just forward a few.
Hello, everyone. I'm Leonard van Rompuy. I think you did a great job at pronouncing my name, so that was good. Thank you so much for having me here today. And I'm here to talk about the AI Act. And I just want to start off by saying that I love the AI Act, and I love that we're regulating artificial intelligence. And the reason is because it gives me an excuse to work with you. And it gives me an excuse to work on things that are much more interesting than the law itself. So thanks, I'm very thankful for that. So just a couple of disclaimers to begin. Of course, you know, I'm a lawyer, so I gotta make those. The first one is that the AI Act is not out yet. Hopefully, it will come out in December, when the Council and the European Parliament agree on a final version. But right now, we're working on a draft. The second thing is that this is not legal advice. I'm talking about research today. And the last thing is that my slides were generated by ChatGPT, based on my talking points, but still. So it's the first time I tried this out, so we'll see how it pans out. But yeah, essentially what I'm going to talk about today, I'm going to give you an overview of the AI Act. I'm not necessarily going to talk about like the requirements in terms of compliance that weigh on people building machine learning systems, for instance. But I will talk on the elements where you will need the help of a lawyer. Because one of the things that this piece of regulation brings to the table is a much greater need for multidisciplinarity. Both from the lawyer's perspective, we need to learn to collaborate with other professionals much better than we do. Also because it is becoming quite necessary for developers to include people from other fields, specifically at the early stages of their design projects, to make sure that they don't end up building another Cambridge Analytica or other systems like that. Yes. And then, yeah, context and relevance. I don't know why ChatGPT made that point, but we'll figure it out. It's a very interesting piece of regulation because for me it's a completely new paradigm of enforcement. In a way, it's a little bit like the GDPR because we have like European institutions that are trying to be really proactive about regulating technology, but at the same time, it's quite different from the GDPR because the GDPR, you know, you do your stuff, you collect your data, you use it, whatever, and then if you haven't done the compliance requirements, you can be sanctioned. Whereas the AI Act is based on the requirement to produce CE marking, marking of conformité européenne. So that's essentially a stamp that you self-certify your product saying that my product complies to the European Union regulation, AI Act, and which other one needs to apply to your product. So in that sense, even before you can actually put your product on the market or use it internally in your organization, you need to come up with this technical documentation that describes all the compliance steps that you took and that says that we did it, we did the good work, and you don't necessarily get controlled on that on the spot. For some specific technologies, yes, you need like an approval from a specific organization before you can even you can't do the CE marking yourself for some specific technologies, I'll talk about that. But for most of them, it's just like self-certification. So, and then potentially further down the line, some kind of Danish organization checks out your technical documentation and says, "Wait a minute, you didn't do the work there," and then comes the sanctions. But the compliance work happens really at the beginning, even before you can put your product on the market. And I find that interesting because it's there's been a lot of resistance with complying to GDPR, but with AI Act, I think it's going to be much more necessary to put in the effort from the beginning. So another thing that I like about this regulation is that it's something to note, maybe, is that it's a market regulation. It's not a human rights instrument, which the GDPR kind of is. It protects individuals' privacy. But the AI Act is really here to create a base standing ground for all technology developers in the European Union and for those that want to export their products to our market. To start from this baseline. It has European values, it has mentions that are relevant for human rights and fundamental rights, but it's not the heart of the piece. Another interesting thing about it is that it's the first piece of regulation, to my knowledge, that requires producers to document their self-critical insight on their product. It's a substantive aspect of the compliance product, the technical documentation, where you essentially, it's the heart of the regulation, really. You have your product, and once you've done everything, you put it all down in writing. And in this document, there are some specific elements where you need to showcase a certain degree of self-criticism, of critical insight, and of saying okay, we couldn't get to the perfect level of safety on those parameters, or we can't really deal with those elements of discrimination, but we are aware of it, and we're doing our best. And that's what's required of you. It's not necessarily to meet all the requirements at the perfect level, but it's an effort in kind of open chest approach to regulation, which I find interesting. I've never seen regulation in any field requiring this of producers before. And then there's the multidisciplinary approach. Like I said, it becomes much more necessary to collaborate with people from other disciplines, and that could be lawyers. But that could also be people working in diversity and integration studies, or in gender studies, or in sociology of racism, for instance, if you're dealing with a product that could have some kind of discriminatory output in its functioning. So it's also interesting because it's heavily reliant on private governance, this tool. Private governance is when the industry by itself comes up with the fine-tuning of the rules that apply. And I'm pretty sure you're familiar with industrial standards. Industrial standards is a big part of private governance. If you've had the curiosity of checking out the AI Act and checking out specifically the chapter on the compliance requirements, it says stuff like you need to have a database free of error. What does that mean? What does that mean if you're doing a medical product or product in construction, or if you're working in something that's in space, whatever, you name it? It's completely senseless by itself. And that's because the AI Act by itself isn't sufficient to do the compliance work. What they did is essentially they said, okay, we have those broader objectives that we want technology to meet in order to be marketed on in the European Union. But we're actually leaving the fine-tuning of details to institutions like IEEE, ISO, Senelec, and so on, which come up with industrial standards that refine and reinterpret those specific legal requirements into industrial standards that specify, okay, if you're working in the medical field with this type of application and this type of technology, this is how you comply to those requirements. So a big part of the compliance work is going to be for you to figure out what those industrial standards are, and they're rolling out as we speak, and making sure that you follow their steps in order to do the compliance work. And on some of them, on some of other aspects, I think that they have a more legal feel to it, and those are the ones where you'll need a lawyer's help, and it's like interpreting in terms of okay, I'll talk a bit more about this later, actually. So just to talk a little bit about multidisciplinary. So this is results from So the process is this. The Commission came up, well, when the Act comes out, there's a certain number of substantive legal requirements in terms of data curation, safety protocols, and so on. Then organizations like IEEE, ISO, they look at those and they create committees to figure out in various specific sectors, okay, how do we comply with those requirements? Those different subcommittees come up with suggestions that are then adopted by those institutions and turned into standards. Then the European Commission, through organizations like CEN or Senelec, looks at those propositions from IEEE or ISO and thinks, okay, those are pretty nice, we want them in European law. And then they mandate Senelec or CEN to come up with a European version. So essentially, they contact and start a collaboration with IEEE, ISO, and they come up with the final industrial standard. And once it's made by Senelec, it goes back to the Commission, and the Commission publishes it in the official journal, saying this is the official European industrial standard for complying to this in that specific context. Is that clearer? It's pretty long, but they started as soon as the draft came out. So there's actually quite a few standards that are ready to be used when the Act comes out.
So let's keep the questions for after the talk, so you get through your talk. We only have 20 minutes for the talk, then we'll do 10 minutes of Q&A, and I will pass the mic around so that the people joining online, that they can also hear the questions.
So, yeah, this is results from a research I did. I interviewed roboticists in Thun, and I know that it's not exactly the same field as machine learning, but I think it does help understand the engineering mindset. So some of the things we figured out is that roboticists think in those terms. First, the most important part is the economy. Can we sell that product? Then the functionality, is it going to be attractive to buy? And then safety concerns. Like, is it going to be safe to use? And then finally, as a subset element, roboticists consider law as an aspect of safety. Just to put some context in how the people I interviewed think. And what I observed is that they tend to push responsibility for the product down the value chain. So when building, for example, those like mobile industrial robot platforms, it can't do much by itself, right? So what happens is that you have those other producers that come up with tools that go on it to do whatever, carry pallets. And then finally, you have the integrator that assembles it and makes sure it works for the specific field in which it will be used, for example, like meat packing industry. And what happens is that Meir says, as soon as you put those weird tools on top of our platform, we're not responsible for anything, which is a bit curious from a legal perspective. And we can talk a bit down the line, but what this matters from the perspective of the AI Act is because I suspect that the compliance burden might be pushed down the value chain of a product. So if you're building some kind of software that does some visual recognition in I don't know, agricultural setting, you might be tempted to say like, our product is not used for anything, you know, by itself. It can't do anything, so we're not responsible for the compliance or the defects that come up with it and pushing it down. Yeah, and what that shows is that it's just to highlight the understanding of law from that specific crowd. And a last thing is that there's actually no common understanding of the legal value in industrial standards among the different people I organize. So even people who work on a daily basis with industrial standards, can someone close the door, please? They don't have like a common understanding of what is their legal value. What do you do with those? What is it like? Is it proof? Is it something we just do because it's good for the market? What is it, you know? Yeah. And lawyers, we're not terribly good at working together with engineers so far, unfortunately. In part because we don't have the same definitions for technology. Like we put AI, robotics, expert systems, all of this, you know, it's all in the same basket to us. It makes sense from our perspective because what matters to us is like the final actions made by a product or the kind of responsibility that come with it if it fails. So that makes a difficult conversation when you have a lawyer and an engineer in the same room. Also, we don't talk tech much. Lawyers don't know how to code. They're completely clueless about most aspects of the technology. And finally, we're very good at saying no. So if you come up to a lawyer with a kind of market-ready prototype, and then they'll say like, no, this is illegal, this is illegal, this is illegal. And then if you take us at the beginning of the development process, and you ask them, okay, is what we're going to do legal? And they'll be like, oh, it depends. You know, it really depends on a lot of factors. So that's not a really good like kind of mindset to work together. And at the law faculty, with my colleagues, we're working on this. We're trying to have a more like yes and approach. And this is important because, like I illustrated before, the legal, the help of a lawyer becomes necessary at a much earlier stage in the development of the product. Because the nature of the technology does that if you wait until the last moment to ask a lawyer to kind of vet the product and they say, no, it's illegal, then you have to start like everything over. Okay, I don't have much time, so I'll try to be brief. Yeah, the AI Act, just to give you a bit of context about the requirements, it applies to machine learning, expert systems. They also mention Bayesian and statistical systems. But they don't make a difference between like physical embodied systems, robots, or purely software products. There's a first category of prohibited practices because of the risk for fundamental rights, and that's going to be typically like the use of mass facial recognition used by law enforcement. That should be forbidden. And then there's regulated high risk. So that's like systems like, for example, biometric identification in critical infrastructure systems in critical infrastructure. There's a whole list. You can check it out. And those products need to comply with the Title III, Chapter 2 of the AI Act. So, like, all the requirements I'll gloss over because they're very technical and I can't necessarily say much about those. And then there's a third category of lower risk products. And those are not concerned by the AI Act. You're encouraged to follow the kind of compliance steps for the development of the product regardless, but there won't be fines if you don't. Essentially, that's what it means. And there's finally like a last category is a transparency requirement if you develop, if you use bots or develop deepfake content, then it has to be obvious that this has been generated, the content has been generated by a machine. Yeah. In terms of the specific like compliance requirements, there's this massive chapter in the AI Act, which is the heart of the compliance requirements about developing a risk management system. And in there, you have to showcase that you have identified fundamental risks and the management measures you have put into place in order to make sure you identify those fundamental risks that the product creates when it's used. For example, if you're developing some kind of system that helps do credit scoring for a bank, then there's like a host of issues that come up with like discrimination in terms of gender, in terms of race, and so on, which need to be taken into account to mitigate the effects of those discriminations. Yeah. There's also the second part of the compliance requirements is to build a quality management system, which I think most companies developing products for the market are used with. But you need to be a bit tighter on those. So a big part of the compliance requirement, like I was saying at the beginning, is just like to have this kind of open chest. But in order to showcase your weaknesses, you need to make sure you can identify them to begin with, right? And this is where the requirements on the quality management system comes into place, because you need to have set up like a structure in the company, in a reiterative design process that includes people from other disciplines and so on, in order to identify the various fundamental rights or safety issues that could be generated by the system. Yeah. And all of this, transparency, no, okay, I'll skip this. I'll skip that. Yeah. And this is where it all ends up, the technical documentation. This document does not need to be made public. But as soon as you want to do the CE marking, you need to send it to the relevant authority. And the things I like about it, it says that there's an element, like in Article 2, it says it needs to include the key design choices, including the rationale and assumptions made. The decisions about any possible trade-offs made regarding the technical solutions, something. Like just mentioning, you have to mention the trade-offs you made for your product. Like that's, to me, it seems like completely, that's very new for any company to have to do this, to show, okay, yeah, we had to make those trade-offs in terms of safety. We couldn't meet those objectives. So I feel like this act is kind of bringing a new philosophy, a new like spirit in compliance, in the development of technology, where there has to be like a more kind of conscious approach, a more honest approach to this. It's I find it really interesting. But that's it for me today. And I think that I would like to hear, like, what do you think about this aspect of collaborating with lawyers? What is scary about working with us? And how do you think that there's things that the training of engineers could change in order to make it easier for you to collaborate with lawyers, but also potentially with sociologists, with people working in gender studies, and so on and so forth? Thank you for your time. And yeah, that's me.
Thank you so much. Let's see if we have any questions in the audience. Otherwise, I have a few to kick us off. Of course, there's questions.
Great. So maybe going back a bit to the previous one. So you gave the examples of IEEE, ISO, and so on. And then you gave the example of the credit scoring system for bank. And I mean, is there any equivalent of IEEE for banks?
In the banking industry?
Systems, or what is the process there? I mean,
I know that they have, they use industrial standards from what I understand. I'm not an expert in banking industry, unfortunately, but I'm pretty sure that ISO makes standards that apply for banking and management. Or, I mean, it's such a highly regulated environment, finance, that even if there aren't industrial standards, there will be like national regulations, for example, that will take the step in interpreting those requirements for the banks when they develop those systems. But I don't know if maybe IEEE makes standards specifically for developing systems in the finance industry. I would not be surprised.
Okay, thanks.
And we have time for a couple more questions. You have one?
Yeah, my question is, do you collaborate with the private sector, or do you plan to do so? Because I think, of course, they have legal teams, but sometimes they are not equipped with the expertise in AI or the specific topic.
Yeah, I've been trying to.
Okay.
I've been trying to, but I think that until the final act is actually published, and then there's like a 2 years adaptation time, the companies are very cold to the idea of making any kind of new, or more precisely, they don't want to pay for it at this stage.
Right.
But yeah, I've worked with, I've done some pro bono work with startups, for instance. I'm also starting collaborations in the research, like advisory roles for people developing like industrial research programs and so on. And they're super interested, and they can see like, oh my God, this is going to be so big, and we missed the GDPR train. We should not miss the AI Act. But then they don't want to hire me for some reason. So I don't know. But it was the same with the GDPR, really. You know, it came out in 2016, and then you had to wait until 2020, 4 years after, for companies to really start the compliance burden for that specific piece of regulation. So it's a bit slow.
So I have a question. Do you think that this AI Act is going to be limiting the development of new AI startups and products and technologies in Europe, or actually maybe even promote it? Because it seems like it has a kind of collaborative element in it. What's your take on that?
So the thing is that the interpretation for those requirements is very fluid. I hope that came across. It's like that it's not hard, it's not hard requirements. It's not like, I think that as long as you can showcase that you've actually put time, effort, question yourself in order to comply, then it shouldn't be too big. Like, of course, if you're a really big company like Maersk developing a system for their own use, you're gonna have to do a lot more work if it falls in that scope. But like for startups, the legal burden is gonna be pretty low. It just needs to be thought of from the beginning. That's the main requirements. Like there needs to be some kind of consideration for the legal elements, even without a lawyer, from the beginning. I would say that's the requirement. So I'm not too concerned for startups. And also, I actually see this act very positively from a competition perspective, because the European Union isn't exactly winning at AI at the moment. But you can almost see this piece of regulation as a very subtle protectionist measure. Because the companies that will want to market and sell their products within the European Union will have to comply with those requirements as well. So when Facebook wants to launch some kind of new service in the European Union, they will have to comply with European values, with the European requirements, which I think gives a head start to companies in Europe who want to develop similar solutions. So I'm not an expert in like those business and innovation aspects and the impact of the technology on competition, unfortunately, but I think that it's a bit more nuanced than people have been making it so far.
So we're going to jump online and see if there are a question there. And if not, I think we could potentially share the questions with you.
Thank you. I have a question from Siddhanta Kupcha, who's also interested in knowing something about the GDPR and AI interactions. And it's within medical GDPR data and whether you can use AI to utilize this data and these patient data.
AI Act GDPR interactions, I think, that's going to be like an important field of research coming up. I don't have an immediate answer to that question. I would say that the requirements of the GDPR will still apply, even if you're using them to develop any kind of AI solution. So you'll still have to respect patient confidentiality and privacy and like good practices in terms of data curation and filing and safety and so on. So like the short answer is yes.
Okay, thank you.
And are those the questions from online for now? Otherwise, I would advertise that you contact Leonard. The email is up here on the screen. And I think in order to respect time, we should thank you for now and welcome our next speakers.
Thank you very much.
All right. Hello, everyone. So I'm glad that you got the disclaimer already that I just jumped last minute. So I hope I can cover. And what I suggest is that if you have more questions and want more than what I'll talk about today, please reach out. Just send an email and I can talk to Victoria when she's back or anyone else and give you more information. And today I'll start by just briefly talking about Novozymes, what if you don't know what Novozymes is, and then talk a little bit generally about AI and machine learning, data science in Novozymes, and talk about a couple of examples. And then Peter will come in to deep dive into protein modeling a little bit more in detail. So starting with Novozymes, so you might know it. There's actually I'm not that far. It's just on the other side of the highway. We have a site, and this is our beautiful purpose. So we say that together, meaning with collaborators and partners, and soon with Christian Hansen, when we merge with yet another biotech company, we are building biological answers for better lives and a better planet. And we have this in a growing world and society, and we have this slogan of rethinking tomorrow, because a lot of these solutions are then providing solutions for a better future and a more sustainable world. And that's very fluffy. So just to talk a little bit more specific, so our main products are around enzymes and microbes or microorganisms, and those can act as catalysts for processes or can build up or break down molecules. And by doing so, they can be used in many different industries and business areas. So a couple of examples is we can have cleaner clothes with less consumption of energy, which is of course a good thing. Then with better nutrition, which in turn results in less food waste. Also greener fuel through biofuels, which of course reduce the dependency on oil. And finally, they can also act to provide higher yields in many processes, industrial processes, for example, which then in turn results in less CO2 emissions and less energy consumption and so on. And also fewer pesticides, as we have also lots of products for agriculture. Yes, so that's a little bit more about our business. And just talking about the size of the company, I think we are around 6,000 employees. There's some people here from Novozymes. I believe that's correct. And then we have 20 R&D sites and 16 production sites all across the globe. So that's all I have about Novozymes. I'll just go into the more interesting stuff, I guess. So just to explain, AI and data science, machine learning in Novozymes is quite challenging, but I just want to say that I'll talk about a few actually use cases for the business part of the company, so more on the sales and commercial part of the company. And then, of course, Peter will talk a little bit about protein modeling. And of course, those cannot happen without technology and people. So I just wanted to mention that. We have many people in Novozymes working with data and AI. And I just checked this morning that our data community has 800 active members, which I think is quite good. And then I'll also spend just one slide on the type of technologies we are using before jumping into the different use cases. So talking about technology and platforms, I did the classic just dump a bunch of logos of technologies, but this is the ones I could think about or that I know are being used in somewhere in Novozymes. And then I started by, on this side, talking about specific platforms we are using, and these are the ones that I'm working on. So I start with those, but there are more. So it's just to give you an idea of what we are using as tools to work on the projects that I'll mention afterwards. And we have a citizen data platform that I won't spend too much time on that, but that's more for the users that actually cannot necessarily code. So it's more drag and drop, so they can do analytics and reporting and so on. But then we also have the analytics and MLOps platform based on the technologies you see there that we have used for the projects that you're going to hear about next. We also have many other platforms in Novozymes. We have the R&D data lake, which I'm sure also uses other technologies. This is just main ones. And that a lot of people are actually using the R&D data lake. And then we have a data platform for production data as well. So this is hopefully just to give you a sense of different technology, big company, different technologies, different things going on that it's difficult to keep track sometimes. But talking then about the specific use cases. So I'm going to briefly just talk through 3 business cases where we are using mostly machine learning, and then I'll also talk a little bit about generative AI. So the first one is called opportunity win rate. I don't have any slides, so I'll just talk through it from the top of my mind. But the first one is opportunity win rate, which is basically based on commercial data, or it's in the commercial part of the company in sales. And the objective of that one, it's currently in production, and we are estimating the likelihood of an opportunity of making a sale actually turning into a sale. And we do that by using the data or the insights about the communication between the sales representatives and our customers. So basically, if they get a customer call, they would use a system where they can file the communication they had, or if they did some trial with a customer to test certain products, they will put that in as well. And using all that data in the historic data of our customers, we can try to predict, is this opportunity actually going to turn into a sale in the future? So just to be clear, an opportunity is just some sort of lead. Okay, there might be a sale in the future here because this customer is interested on a particular product. So that's one product, and the interesting part of that is that we got a percentage of the likelihood that it will turn into a sale, but we also provided, using sharp values, the feature importance. So basically saying what is indicating this value being really high. Most likely it will become a sale or not. And often is maybe they haven't linked the product, so if the customer doesn't know the product, they'll probably not buy anytime soon. So they can get the sales representatives can get a lot of insights from that and know what to do, how to act based on the model output. So that's the first one. The second one, it's a quite typical business case for analytics. And that's advanced forecasting of sales. So basically forecasting the next 2 years in sales for Novozymes. And we started with baking industry to kind of narrow down and currently are working on it to see if we can expand it to other industries as well. And for that, we are using. I can talk about more specifics of the model later if you like. In terms of time, I need to keep track. But essentially, we are using a time series model. All of this is built with Python in the platform that I mentioned before. And finally, the third example I have here is slow-moving items. I'm actually not involved on that one, but so what I know is that is basically trying to identify items that we have in the inventory that are likely to not be sold. So we should act on it in some way. So they are slow moving; they are not moving to be sold. So that's another. My colleagues working on that one. And again, if you have more questions about these, just reach out afterwards. Now, just to quickly talk about generative AI, and I should actually underline here legal on the governance, because we have been talking a lot with the legal department. So I think I'll talk to Leonard afterwards. So first of all, we are working on multiple use cases, some of them really early on, just brainstorming on ideas. One that we are pretty close is to have our own instance of ChatGPT for Novozymes employees, so they can enter confidential information. So it's essentially the same as OpenAI ChatGPT, but for internal use, where you can add company information. And then we've been talking about, and some are already working on actually, of course, training or embedding the model with internal information. So you can use it for many applications, as you can imagine. But for example, building specific chatbots on particular information that is about our products for commercial reasons. And then also using it for drafting documents, the same way Leonard drafts his PowerPoint. We can also do that for standard documents that we need to prepare. We can improve a lot of support chatbots that we have internally, IT support, human resources, and so on. So this is what we've been trying to support in my team, support these use cases and trying to implement them. And along with that, it's really important that the infrastructure is professional and can be maintained when these models are in production. And then also I mentioned the legal part and also security, of course. It's really important for Novozymes, so we make sure that our data stays within our reach. And finally, we, as part of these initiatives, we also trying, since it's such a new technology, especially in the corporate world, it's really important to communicate about it clearly, what it is, how can it be used, and also, organize knowledge sharing sessions and so on. So this is all I have from my part. And I'll just, you have the mic already? Super.
I do. Is it working? Awesome. Cool. So I want to take a little bit of a detour and talk more about sort of the R&D side of it. So I'm an industrial PhD at Novozymes, and I work with protein engineering, essentially. So how can we use various AI machine learning driven methods in order to optimize enzymes or some particular trait. So here's a short overview. Cool. So just to make sure that we're all somewhat on the same page, Novozymes, we work a lot with enzymes. Enzymes are a subtype of proteins that catalyze various chemical reactions, so increasing the reaction speed by many orders of magnitude. Extremely convenient, extremely useful in many different cases. Proteins in general, which I'm probably going to use the two terms interchangeably, so please forgive me if I offend anyone. So proteins are these fantastic macromolecules that are found absolutely everywhere. They are workhorses and responsible for many functions all over life. They are essentially just comprised of sequences of amino acids. So up here to the right, this is just a little schematic of what an amino acid is. Then we have this little square R, this side chain. We can 20 different ones, so then depending on that, we get sort of a different sequence of amino acids leading to various proteins. So then when we have this chain, it folds into some complex three-dimensional structure, and it's actually this three-dimensional structure that determines exactly what the protein does. So let's just quickly dwell on that a bit. So when we talk about proteins, we often work with the primary structure. So it's just like the sequential information of the different amino acids in order. Then we have the secondary structure. So these are sort of local structural elements that we see recurring again and again due to the interactions between various amino acids. And then finally, the more interesting one, according to me at least, is the tertiary structure. So this full 3D structure of the protein, what it looks like. And this is, of course, very nice to look at. In reality, it's more like a big blob, apart from the colors. That's just my choice, right? So the interesting thing about protein structures is that it used to be one of the great big problems of biology in order to determine when we have some protein sequence, we have hundreds of millions of those, how do we actually find out what the structure looks like? It used to take weeks, if not months, just to, in a laboratory, reach the actual structure, find out what it looks like. Now, due to Google DeepMind's AlphaFold 2, we can do this in a matter of minutes or hours, depending on the hardware. So this has essentially opened up entirely new avenues of ways that we can actually model data. So we used to have just the sequences. Now we also have all of the structural information, which means that we can directly model what the proteins look like in three-dimensional space. So one of the ways that we can do this is we can directly now encode the geometric information, because two amino acids that are maybe very far from each other in this sequence space, well, when the protein folds into some complex structure, these amino acids might be very close to each other. So now we can actually model this geometry by, for example, constructing graphs like we see here. We can find out which amino acids we allow to interact with each other. There's several interesting use cases for this, and one is what's called inverse folding. So I mentioned before that the structure of the protein determines what the protein does. Well, now we can say that what do we have a particular structure, because we know that it has a function, but what if we want to maybe try to find out which alternate sequences could we put into that structure so that could give some different properties but the same function. So this is what's called inverse folding. Another thing is just protein design. So instead of maybe the entire chain of amino acids replacing that, we could look at different areas of the protein or maybe allow a model to do this, then find out what would be better fits in order to change a particular area if you want to change the surface of the protein, as an example. Another thing, if we take a step back and then look at the primary structure, because the idea is that a particular protein sequence leads to a particular structure. So it means that we believe that all of the information is actually contained in the sequence. An example of a sequence is what we see down here. So there are 20 different amino acids. What if we treat these each individual amino acid as a word? And there are 20 in total, so that's a pretty small vocabulary. And then we can treat an entire protein as a sentence, essentially. So this means that we can actually take all of these wonderful models developed in natural language processing, and then just throw these tens or hundreds of millions of sequences that we know, throw them into these models and see what pops out. And this has proved to be extremely competitive in order to, well, for a wide variety of different methods, especially for transfer learning, because often with laboratory data, we don't have too much available. But this means that now we can leverage all of this unlabeled data in order to essentially create these condensed, ideally meaningful representations in order to add even more information. Last thing I'd like to briefly touch upon is the Novozymes Kaggle competition, which, first of all, I should mention it's finished. There's no more money to be won. But it's something we had last year where the idea was to, based on a data set we have where we measured all of the different thermostability properties of a particular protein. When we change some of these amino acids, then we wanted to be able to predict like which changes should we make, how good are we at doing this. So this was an open task, and was an absolute success. And we see that we had almost 2,500 teams with nearly 50,000 submissions. And we learned a lot of interesting things from this. And something that's maybe not terribly surprising, but nice to verify it, is that it's not only the machine learning methods that come ahead, and it's not only sort of the domain-driven physical models, but it's often the combination of these that leads to the best results. And of course, it's a Kaggle competition, so it's an ensemble model of some sort that ends up winning. That's how it goes. But point is that this has led to some very invaluable insights into the field, because we have both sort of the informatics people working on this problem, and also people who've never worked with proteins before. So many different sort of communities and perspectives coming together in order to try to solve this problem, which is very relevant for us at Novozymes. All right, that's what I had.
Thank you so much, Peter. I think if both Sarah and Peter could join up on stage, and we'll see what questions are popping up in the minds of the audience. We'll start in the room, and then we'll take some if there is any online. No questions at all. It was so clear.
Thank you very much for the talk. May I ask you, do you work with multi-protein complexes? Do you use docking and all this approach in the product at Novozymes?
I don't specifically. I'm focused on some connected to some individual projects. So I'm only working with single proteins at the time. But subjects like protein docking and sort of these, when we look at the quaternary structure and how all of this interacts, is also hugely important and also something that we work a lot with, just not me specifically. So hopefully no more specific questions on that.
And do you have access to some supercomputer power, quantic computer? Because to do this type of
yes,
calculation,
supercomputer is a relative term, but yes, we have internal computational sources.
Okay, excellent. Thank you.
Any other questions came up? If not, then I have one. So this one is for you, Sarah. I'm curious about the predictive modeling you mentioned around the win rate when you had the sales conversations. And I heard that there's a Media Lab group led by Alex Pentland, where they've used something like that for coaching a call center in India. So they had like live coaching of people. So they would get, the call center people would get feedback on screen about how the conversation was going, like based on nonverbal cues like hesitation, pause in speech, speed of speech, and so on. Is that similar to what you're doing?
Can you hear me?
No.
No.
You can also get this mic.
Hello? No. So I think the closest we have, actually we plan to do that, is to use the email correspondence. So of course we don't have it live because it's not a call center. I mean, there's different interactions. There are calls as well, but we don't. They will just report what they discuss in text, and they don't always do that, so we lose that information. But still, but they do have a mailbox where they do the correspondence by email, and we have talked about getting that data, and it goes a little bit into maybe the legal part as well, and using that kind of information. But they have like a combined mailbox to use, and they are willing to share that information as well. So we plan actually to include that in the model to see if we get more insights. But I will check it out. Thanks.
Yeah, I can send you a link. Cool. And it's always good when our speakers need to talk to each other afterwards too.
Yeah, live emotional recognition systems in a call like this. Oh, that's I don't know if it will be part of the AI Act in the end, but I find that problematic.
I just want to say something. So regarding it's a comment to your talk, regarding the collaboration with legal, from our side at least. I think since we started working on generative AI, I've been talking to legal almost every week, which has been really, I think, helpful for them and for us. So I definitely value that. I think it's really important. Yeah. And it has been helping us a lot with developing guidelines, including not only for generative AI, but for general AI use and preparing for the AI Act as well. So it's
super good to be proactive for sure. Yeah. And it looks like we have some questions online.
We do have one from Jeanette Vestergaard, who is interested in the sales analysis opportunity win model that you presented, and whether you register all the call from potential clients, and if you do, if they are notified beforehand.
This doesn't work still, right? No. I'll use this one. So yeah, we don't record the calls like I mentioned earlier. We just it's just whatever the sales representative writes down, but we do have the consent to keep some information from them, including like their emails and stuff. Yeah.
And I think we have time for one more question. Did you have one? No. Yes. Here you go.
Okay, was Peter? Your name? Okay, cool. You had this the slide about how you actually use language models to predict or to get new inputs on how to design enzymes.
Yes.
Could you? I find it extremely interesting how the translation of a physical model to sentences type. How could you tell me a little bit more how it works and how successful it is? Can you use existing models? Do you have to create the whole machine yourself, or how does it work?
The good thing is that we can actually use a lot of the existing models. Of course, it needs to be tailored a little bit for the specific data that we're working with. But if we just represent our proteins as, well, like as a larger word, you could say, right, which is a bunch of letters, then we have ways of encoding this into numbers, and then we can, for example, a common thing to do is then we mask some of the data, so we hide it, and then we train the model to fill in what should be there. So the idea here is that the model learns to look at the context of a protein, so look on the entire sequence and then find out, okay, there's a gap here, like what should be here instead, and the idea is that it learns from this from the rest of the context. So that could be one way of doing that, because if we know that this area of the protein is not working for some particular reason, then we could mask that out and then get the model to give us sort of a distribution of what could be here instead, what's the most likely thing that should be there. So that could be one example there.
Does it work?
It does, yes, surprisingly well, yeah. All right.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Peter and Sarah. So you have an advantage if you're here in the room, because you can speak with the speakers afterwards. You can also join us for a tour of Skylab if you want to. So before we end completely, I'd like to give you a preview of what's coming up in AI Lunch Talk next time and the time after and the last time of the fall. So let's see. I can share with you that next time is going to be October 12th. And I think we might actually have some slides that we can show online to those watching online. October 12th, we have Implement Group visiting, Victor Emil Funk, if I'm remembering correctly. And he's going to share about like the whole life cycle of services that can be beneficial to small and medium-sized companies in terms of AI. And then we have Rockwool Shakhtar, I think is his last name, is going to be talking about how Rockwool uses AI. Then we have November 9th, where we moved the whole party to Digital Tech Summit, which you can join for free. There's actually a QR code on the slide if you're watching online. So I really recommend that you sign up for that and join. It's on November 9th, as I mentioned, also during lunch. And you can hear from Isabella. Last name is gone, but she's representing the startup Focal X. So if you've used one of those borrow a car app and you have to take pictures to document the kind of scratches and dents that are in the car, then you've probably used Focal X. And then we have Charlene Putney, and she has a startup that's called Ride with Leica. So it's also AI-driven. And on December 7th, we have Rasmus Suneré, who's going to be talking about the new test facility that's available to researchers and to small and medium-sized enterprises in Denmark. That's going to be launched very soon. And we also have, who do we have? This is my test. Thank you. We have an applied AI lunch talk veteran, actually, Michael Fuglsang from Force Technologies. He's going to come and talk to us about a new project. So there's something to look forward to. Please get those dates in your calendar, or feel free to follow us where you get your information about AI lunch talks. Thank you for joining. Have a great day.